Leftists everywhere love democracy until their candidate loses an election. So it was no surprise when uh, two members of the squad lost their primaries, uh, that somebody had to be blamed. I mean, it's not really possible that people will go out and vote for the wrong candidate, right? No, it's either people vote for the left. It's actually it shows how much the left and what the right is becoming have in common. They refuse to believe that it's possible for them to lose an election. And so we've talked about both Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush when they lost their primaries, because from time to time we like to do positive topics on our shows here. But yeah, this story has not gone away, and of course, it's something that can be brought up whenever whenever possible. And with Ilhan Omar, I believe, having the latest primary, which she won and didn't really have much competition there. Uh, this this was a good time for The Guardian to do one of their special, in-depth best journalism ever kind of stories, and that's what they did, talking about pro-Israel money in American politics. Um, yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through that article. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Marco and Richard. Um, any comments before we jump into the article, Marco?
Well, it's quite staggering how money used for a cause that they don't support suddenly it implies there is something sinister behind. There is some pulling the string. When we all know that the feature of a mixed economy is lobbying, i.e., pressure groups pushing their own agenda, pushing for the government to effectively do what they want. So it's totally unfair to single out only a group, in this case being the Guardian singling out the Jews, because that's what they do, and implying that they're doing something wrong. It's like, really? Because what is your lot doing?
And I'd just add that, I mean, if you haven't seen us criticize a Guardian article before, where have you been? The Guardian tone and the BBC tone are one and the same. So this is like you're getting two for the price of one in terms of seeing how they would approach a similar topic. And that tends to be, I think of it as the three S's: snide, sneering, and self-righteous. That's the underlying flavor of what virtually everything they report is. And of course, when Jews are up to be presented as the enemy and the one to be lampooned and lambasted, then they're going to go for it with both barrels. So that's what they do.
Yeah, so let me go and read from this web page where The Guardian talks about how they oppose money being spent in all sorts of causes. Bad actors spreading disinformation online to fuel intolerance. Teams of lawyers from the rich. Wait, sorry, that's I scrolled down too much and I read The Guardian asking for money for their cause. But here's the article itself. I'll scroll back up. Five things. Sometimes I laugh at my own jokes, but only when they're very good. Five things we learned from our reporting on the US's pro-Israel lobby. And of course, there's this stage with AIPAC and the evil flags of the United States and Israel, what some of the Guardians' best friends call, the big Satan and the little Satan. The Guardian followed key congressional races affected by AIPAC and similar groups for the past few months. The progressive U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota easily overcame a primary challenge on Tuesday, delivering a major victory for progressives after a primary season marked by mixed success amid an onslaught of spending from pro-Israel lobby groups. The progressive squad in the House were early to embrace calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and criticize Israel's offensive for its toll on civilians, drawing the ire of groups like the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Um, Omar and Summerlee of Pennsylvania were still able to easily cruise to victory in their primaries, but pro-Israel groups successfully picked off its two biggest squad targets, of this primary season: Jamal Bowman of New York and Cori Bush of Missouri. Okay, I mean, first of all, even the word progressive, so many words here are problematic that some of them we're just gonna, understandably skip over without even challenging. And probably the use of the word progressive in politics deserves its own episode, because the idea that people who are against progress call themselves progressive is offensive and is intentionally misrepresenting what their actual views are. But yeah, the progressive squad in the House were early to embrace calls for a ceasefire in Gaza and criticize Israel's offensive. So this is something, sorry for the spoiler that you're going to see throughout this article. It's all about ceasefire. It's all about not wanting violence. What they want is for hostilities to end. Yeah, they were very early to call for a ceasefire, because their side had done its thing. And so Daniel, I don't know where this is from, but he sent it here in our Slack. Rashid Tlaib first called for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict about a week after the October 7th attacks by Hamas. By October 13th, she had began advocating for a ceasefire and continued to do so publicly and forcefully, including at a protest in Washington on October 18th, where she reiterated her call for an immediate ceasefire. So what this is to say, no, this is still true of calls for a ceasefire, but it was so obvious back then. You call for a ceasefire, you call for October 7th to go unanswered. You call for it to succeed, and you call for it for Hamas's calls to do it again and again until there are no Jews left to kill, to go unchallenged, and for nobody to attempt to stop them. It is a call for the extermination of Jews, but it sounds nicer when you say ceasefire. Marco.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. That if you call yourself like a progressive, automatically you buy yourself a kind of aura of do-goodiness. These people are actually the left party of the Democrats, the people who wanted effectively more and more socialism introduced in the United States, and the moment they start asking for anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas policies to be enacted, there's no surprise that pro-Jew and pro-Israel groups will come out of the woodwork and start putting up a fight, because, as you mentioned there, a few days after October 7th, it's ridiculous to even talk about a ceasefire, and also using the kind of language that they used at the time. There are some press releases from a few days, the week after October 7th, where they're actually talking about Hamas, Palestinians and Israel on the same line. Lives here and lives there matter the same. So we should be careful not to kill people. Blah blah blah. Totally ignoring the fact of the week before. So these people come out openly with a pro-Hamas agenda, and then they complain when somebody tries to fight them in a democratic way, using the democratic tools that they are there for expressing opinions, and they take it quite personally. And of course, right now the left is doing somersaults trying to rally behind Kamala, because since they were unable to hide how far gone Biden was, which started really 4 years ago. It was already obvious in the campaign trails in 2020 that he wasn't up to the job, but they managed to hide it up to now. And now they had to swap him with somebody else. And unfortunately, somebody else is a compromise candidate that nobody wants. Bear in mind that she's been kept under eyes for the last 4 years, because really every time she opens her mouth, if it's not a cackle, it's something stupid, as she says. But these people are trying to put up a united front and show that they're good Democrats, and they find themselves having to deal with the consequences of their actions, which has been nice to see Bowman and what's the other one, and Bush being kicked out, but it would be nice to see more of them. And of course, the Guardian being a good lucky for the left all over the world, is writing his opinion pieces. Just look at the language. An onslaught of spending. Do you even use onslaught of spending as a word? But again, it's a bit debatable, the choice of the thing, because that they always associate aggression with Israel, don't they? And they're even using their word. They want to make sure they're making the case quite clear. We are anti-Israel. Whatever Israel does, even if it's about defending itself, defending its own population from the savages that surrounds it, they're wrong. The Guardian, the lefty is right, and everybody else is wrong.
When it comes to spending, normally the left is quite happy to go spending crazy, aren't they? So an onslaught of spending is particularly sticks in the craw in that regard. But yeah, I totally back up what Marco just said there. And to look at some of the other language in there, you've got the fact that they were picked off. It's successfully picked off its two biggest squad targets, what with a long-range rifle. I mean, the background sense of aggression and military and language it runs right through the whole thing. And Marco mentioned that within this article, the left is often able to ignore the fact of the week before, but they're often able to ignore the fact of the paragraph before as well, to be honest, because they're talking both about the fact that the pro-Jewish lobby is able to, the hint behind all this is manipulate the outcome with its spending power, whilst at the same time pointing out how easily the victories were, and yet also not only was it an easy victory, but it was a major victory. What a major easy victory was it? I mean, how is it major if it's also easy? It just exposes what they're thinking of is. And of course, starting off the article with the pro-Israeli lobby, we're talking here about two particular groups, and we'll get on to the details of that as we go through it. But of course, there's always a suggestion that the pro-Israel lobby is everywhere, pulling the strings behind every darkened room is a group of Jews who are in control of everything, and that's but you've been able to find out what they're doing with their money on this occasion. So says the Guardian, even though it's in the public domain, and anybody can support a candidate, and particularly when it comes to pursuing your values. So, I mean, as Marco pointed out, when it comes to the left pursuing your values, whether it's environmentalism or BLM or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to support the values of supporting Israel in the face of the barbarity of aggression from Hamas and Palestine, then you're obviously on the wrong side. So.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Richard, you mentioned the left is usually happy to spend. Well, no, they're happy to spend when it's other people's money that was taken by force. They're not happy to spend, it's not just the Jews. If somebody, spends money they've earned on a yacht or anything, they'll criticize that. And of course, AIPAC is their money is money that people chose to give to them to support a cause that the Guardian doesn't like. So there is a difference there. It is the type of spending that they criticize. It could be that when it's Jews, they might be more likely to use the word onslaught, but no, it's criticism that they, that others get as well. And of course, the Ayn Rand Center UK also spends the money that people choose to give us, and you can become a member and be one of those people in the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member, and the higher up you go, the more perks and the more likely we are to have a deep dive article in The Guardian examining what it is that we do and how we influence people. All right, should we continue to read the article? The article continues. The Guardian followed key congressional races affected by AIPAC and similar groups for the past few months. With the primaries coming to a close, here's what we learned about the pro-Israel lobby's efforts this year. And then it's divided into a few parts. Part 1, AIPAC is spending more as public opinion on Israel shifts. The 23 million AIPAC pumped into defeating just 2 members of Congress can be seen as evidence of the depth of the pro-Israel lobby's concern that public opinion is shifting away from decades of largely unquestioning support for Israel as the US's, quote, greatest ally, particularly among young Americans. These shifts in public opinion threaten the claims of a bipartisan consensus on support for Israel in Congress. AIPAC's creation of the United Democracy Project Political Action Committee in 2021 to directly intervene in election campaigns for the first time was in part a response to opinion polls showing that even before the present war in Gaza, half of Democrats wanted the U.S. to give more support to the Palestinians. Okay, then they show where this money is being spent, on which candidates, for which candidates, and against which candidates. We'll have the link in the description so you can see it for yourself. The article continues. The group pledged to spend 100 million this election year. It has so far spent more than 90 million. Bowman and Bush's races were the two most expensive House primaries in history, according to the firm AdImpact. Bowman and Bush were elected to Congress on the back of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has focused on reframing the Palestinian cause as a civil rights issue of resistance to Israeli domination. The shift in narrative alarms AIPAC, as has the impact of international court rulings against Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and a growing consensus within international human rights organizations that Israel imposes a form of apartheid on Palestinians. Okay, I want to start with a part here because this is the thing with journalism is, yeah, you have to editorialize along the way, and the final product that we see includes the things that the journalists and the editors decide are important and excludes what they think is not important. Now, what makes something important or not important it depends on what you're trying to convey. Do you want people to know what's going on? Do you want people to come away from reading your article with a certain point of view? So Black Lives Matter, let me go back to how this was written exactly. Bowman and Bush were elected to Congress on the back of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has focused on reframing the Palestinian cause as a civil rights issue of resistance to Israeli domination. This was that is as far as the Black Lives Matter part goes. Now, on October 8th, Black Lives Matter Chicago tweeted this tweet, and basically, again, this was 24 hours, maybe less than 24 hours after paragliders, among others, terrorists who came into Israel on paraglides, raped and slaughtered people in the Nova Music Festival. Black Lives Matter wanted to express support, and their support was not a reframe as a human rights issue. Like these people on the left, The Guardian, obviously with this article very much so, want to reframe a lot of things away from observation and away from any decent kind of pro-human approach to things. But yeah, this is what Black Lives Matter wanted people to take away from that. This is a great moment, a great victory for Palestine. Jews had been slaughtered. Now, Black Lives Matter was in the pro-rape, pro-murder camp before. If you want to defund the police, you want the police not to intervene with crimes. But this was a even for them a particularly particularly clear statement on where they stand. And it's interesting, in the same paragraph, we hear about human rights organizations. Yeah, these people want to reframe a lot. Marco.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite staggering that these people behave in this way. As you said, that tweet is just beyond stupid. It borders line the evil. You must have known by then what's happened and how it was done. So the only reason why you produce this kind of images is because you're making a statement, and the statement is, we stand with Hamas against Israel. So they agree about the slaughter of over 1,000 civilians, one by one slaughtered. And clearly they must be quite happy that the people of Gaza, the people that they love so much, are still holding hostages in Gaza, by the way. But going back to this issue of the funding, I mean, to talk about the fact that the group directly intervenes in election campaigns is effectively throwing a smear, making you believe that they are, interfering illegally. They're doing something wrong underwater. They are funding, they are bribing, they're doing all sorts of stuff that they believe the Jews are behind anyway. So all this kind of behavior, this kind of language only betrays their values. And again, as you mentioned earlier on, your actions follow what's important to you, what your values are. And the values of the people are quite clear, and they shine through the kind of action they take, the kind of behavior and language that they use. And this article is quite brimming with it. It's just a shining example of what anti-Semitism looks like today, what a secular blood libel looks like. And the Guardian is putting in front of our faces every day. And these graphs that they pose about how much they spent against the New York seat or the Minnesota seat, 9.9 million, 5.2 million. But they ignore the fact that, for example, by the end of June, Bowman himself had already spent something like 5.6 million. So it's not like the pro-Israel, the pro-Jew institutions are putting money behind the whole thing. The whole campaign is fought by convincing people, by doing ads, by making statements, mainly nowadays by running advertising, and that costs a lot of money. And they're not the only people who do. Again, the 5 million that Bowman himself spent, it was money spent through direction. Or are you suggesting that he was doing something wrong? He was intervening somehow, or perhaps even talking about resistance to Israel domination. I mean, how terrible this kind of stuff. I can't believe it that they can get away with it. And they do that all the time. They throw the smear and then, oh, we are sorry, and they get away with it. Anyone else who says something like this with this kind of intent would be lambasted, would be cancelled. Anybody coming from the center or center right would never be allowed to just apologize. It would be handed to oblivion, really.
When it comes to that tweet of the paraglider there, that's a visual representation of what you're seeing in this article. Because on the side of that paraglider, you see the tiniest little bump on the side of him. Now that's the automatic weapon that's used. That's the purpose of him strapping a paraglider to his back. And he's going to use that when he lands, as it did on October the 7th, to murder anyone he comes across. Man, woman, child. No matter what circumstances, he's going to mow them down. But that little bump, that little sanitized image, which makes him just look like somebody going for a flight, is the equivalent of what you're doing each time that you talk about pro-ceasefire, as opposed to being pro-Hamas and essentially pro-genocide from the Hamas side, not the side they claim, of course. I think there's several things in this section I wanted to comment on, including the phrase, where is it? In part, a response to opinion polls. So, this article is claiming that because the mood has shifted, it claims, and Israel is therefore doesn't have the defense it once had in terms of public opinion, they've had to spend more money. And they've had to spend more money, in part, a response to opinion polls. Now, that is the kind of phrase that is utterly unverifiable as a fact. You cannot say whether that played any part whatsoever in the decision making, but you're presenting it as the only reason, because what you're stressing, of course, what the author is stressing, is the fact that Israel is losing the PR war, and by writing that repeatedly, you're engaging in the PR war to make sure that Israel is seen to lose further. And of course, it all adds to the drip drip effect, which leads to that impression. It's true to an extent, but of course, does it mean that they're spending more money? Possibly, in the extent that if your values are really under threat, you're going to really try and defend them. But nevertheless, it's hardly the whole story in the first place. As well, of course, this notion that the US has been relentlessly pro-Israel with an unquestioning stance, that it's and yet you can go back across any decade, any year you like, and see constant criticism of Israel. To be honest, when it comes to especially from the left, and then of course you've got the BLM side of it. And the BLM movement, which often needs to morph into a new format just to justify its existence half the time anyway. If there aren't the level of police aggression towards black people that they need in order to keep themselves in the news, then they've got to keep adding to the sense of grievance all over the place and try and bolster a need to exist. And go on. But of course, we've noticed and we've seen the level of corruption within the BLM movement. I'm talking not only the level of corruption in terms of the ideology they're pushing, but of course, in terms of the corruption of individuals and the siphoning off of money sent by people in order to support the BLM movement all over the place. So all of that's been apparent. And of course, all of that is not referred to at all here. That's utterly missing.
Can I just add another point? I mean, these few paragraphs in the section are so telling of what the left believes they live in, really. Talking about a growing consensus within international human rights organization that Israel is imposing a form of apartheid on Palestine. So out there is a consensus fueled by articles like this, fueled by institutions like the Squad, and every single jihadi MP in Britain, Corbyn and the far left, all these kind of things that are effectively paying for advertising. And these people get rattled when the other side pays for advertising in order to counteract their propaganda. So they don't like that. But they see that if there is a consensus, that it must be true. Imagine the kind of screwed up mentality that these people the world that these people live in. No wonder they're all angry and quite vicious.
Yeah, and we've talked about, how the pro-Palestinian propaganda machine works, and it is very much kind of this loop of you have these organizations that exist. Again, they're cause enterprises. So are we. Like we say that clearly. And then you have the commentators like Owen Jones saying, don't take it from me, take it from the experts, the human rights organizations. Then you have the Guardian reporting this as, look, if the human rights organizations say it, what are you, against human rights? And of course then politicians. By the way, politicians I think are at the very end of the line or bottom of the barrel, or however you want to describe them. Basically, they probably to some extent believe this, or at least chose to go with it. But yeah, certainly the more you go into the center in politics, the more likely you are to have them, as we saw with Rishi, and as I believe we're going to see a lot with Starmer here in the UK. The latest headlines will very much affect what their policy is, and it will shift rapidly. And another thing here in this the end of this paragraph, like I said, they put so much crap into relatively so few words that they manage to get away with things. Even on this show, I guarantee you there are things that we can reread this article later and say, oh, how did we miss this? But yeah, after the BLM part, it says the shift in narrative alarms AIPAC. Okay, so first of all, there's some, I think, some psychologizing here, but let's leave that. Yeah, the shift in narrative alarms AIPAC, as has the impact of international court rulings against Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and a growing consensus within the international. So yeah, it could be that AIPAC is alarmed. They should be, but it could be with the growing consensus that Jews need to be exterminated. This article could be written, there's a growing alarm at AIPAC that Guardian readers take to the streets every weekend to shout from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which means all Jews in the land that the Palestinians want should be killed, which is more Jews than were killed in the Holocaust, and that is alarming. But no, the Guardian chooses to frame it in a different way, and yeah, we'll see a bit more on how they frame things in the next paragraph. Does either of you have any additional comments on that or on this before we continue?
Yeah, it's also nice that they acknowledge the fact that most of these people in the squad, they're actually diversity hires, aren't they? They only managed to get there because of BLM stuff. Had it not been for a Marxist movement called BLM, these people probably wouldn't have had a platform. But hey, they look all right. They look the right shade of white. So yeah, we like them.
And
And
also, just to mention,
yeah.
just because it fits in with the course that we've been doing, the history of philosophy course on a Sunday with James Valiant, where we've been discussing Marxism. You see how Marxism morphs all the time to adopt different forms as the winds blow in different directions. The Marxism remains, and that's so true of this BLM movement in all its forms. Well, how it changes but it retains its desire to control people in that same way.
Yeah, that's, we were talking about maybe doing a show about Marxism. We've done those before, but I think there's a lot of material there to cover. Yeah, I mean, I wonder, Marx was definitely evil. These people are evil, but I don't know. Marx himself, I think, would not approve of much of what we see today on the left. Maybe on the economics, but first of all, he was very much against immigration. I don't know what he would think of the you know, spectrum of hundreds of genders. I don't know what he would think of, yeah, different. I'm not sure. But yeah,
You will certainly enjoy the anti-Semitism, that's for sure.
yeah, that is true. That's the one constant in Marxism. Um, Thank you, Roland, for the super chat. Marx would definitely disapprove, Roland, just from the fact that it's a super chat, but also from what it says. Roland says, here's some more pro-Israel money. Yes, I believe, although I don't know this for a fact, that Roland is not Jewish, but don't worry, it will count as Jewish money. It was Biden, right, who said that a black person, if you're a black person and you don't vote for me, you ain't black. So yeah, if you're Jewish or non-Jewish and you give money to the Ayn Rand Center UK, don't worry, anti-Semites will count you as a Jew. Thank you, Christopher Smith, also for the super chat, which means to the Guardian, you are now officially a Jew. All right, let's read some more. Let's read one more short paragraph of this article because this one is special in its own right and says something that we talk about a lot, but it keeps being said, so we'll keep talking about it. The article continues. The war in Gaza, where Israel has killed at least 40,000 Palestinians, a majority of them civilians, has only added to the challenges now facing the pro-Israel lobby, with a third of Democrats saying Biden has not been, quote, tough enough with Israel. Oh, there's a space missing here between the quotation marks. Yeah, I love it when we find errors like that in The Guardian as well. But yeah, look, just tell us that you're reading Hamas press releases. They don't bother saying, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, when they quote the number, when they say that most of them are civilians, all of them are civilians. None of them are officially soldiers. They're civilians, many of them armed, many of them have killed Jews, many have tried to kill Jews, many just celebrated on the streets when Jews were being killed, and many, maybe certainly the children, happened to be put in harm's way by the grown-ups. And of course, yeah, there's the Israel has killed these people is also problematic because, again, Israel didn't start this war, didn't want this war. the people responsible for those deaths are the people who chose for there to be war and choose for there to continue to be war. Margot.
Yes, I like how this phrase "killed at least" and whatever, put in whatever number you want, Palestinians, a majority of them civilians. They used to say this one, I think, in the press release on the 16th of October. They used to say a majority of them civilians. So they are able to work out who's a civilian and who's a Hamas terrorist just by what? By believing Hamas, because we know that they fight in normal clothing, in civilian clothing. They haven't got a uniform, and they keep throwing stuff. Civilians are holding the hostages right now as we speak. So really, are they really majority civilians, or the majority is actually Hamas terrorists? So, and by the way, about the typo, the Guardian is famous for typos and the arbitrary use of grammar. So I wouldn't worry about that missing space.
It's known as a Grawny ad, isn't it, for messing up its own title? Yeah. What can I add here? I think that what the use of the hyperlinks here to if you're really interested, you could go down the hyperlink rabbit hole and find out why he's not been tough enough with Israel, because that's a hyperlinked phrase. But it says, with a third of Democrats saying he's not been tough enough. Well, I don't know. Obviously, 2/3 either don't know or think he has been tough enough. So, how does that not go against your argument here when you're talking about whether candidates win or lose or not in primaries for the party, where 2/3 don't think he's been, taking the line that you're taking? So yeah, there's that, and of course, there's the hyperlink on the killed at least 40,000 Palestinians, in case you want to read the caveat about where that information came from or what its latest number is, according to whoever, because we're not going to bother to mention it within this piece, as you guys have said.
Yeah, I just followed your advice and clicked the hyperlink. Yeah, okay, maybe it is my fault. So yeah, so the title says Gaza rubble likely to conceal untold horror to swell 40,000 death toll. Basically, yeah, the figure given by the Strip's health officials does not tell the full story of Palestinian losses, excluding those missing or buried in the rubble. Basically, yeah, I don't know if I should go through this and see if at any place they mention that the people saying this, they may be calling themselves the health ministry, but they are the same organization that started the war by slaughtering 1,200 Jews and taking 250 hostages. But yeah, what they're saying is there's no challenge to the death toll. The only challenge is it might be too low because we don't know if there are people buried under the rubble. So yeah, that's the Guardian for you. All right, should we continue or all right, let's so the second point here, pro-Israel groups spent big to pick off vulnerable incumbents. AIPAC's UDP spent 14.6 million in its campaign to unseat Bowman. The group Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, spent another 1 million to help George Latimer, the Westchester County executive, win the Democratic nomination. In Bush's primary, UDP spent 8.6 million to promote the campaign of Wesley Bell, a St. Louis prosecutor, and DMFI contributed close to $500,000 to the effort. The financial commitment paid off as both Bowman and Bush went on to lose their primaries. But it's worth noting that Bowman and Bush were already viewed as more vulnerable than some of their other squad colleagues at the start of the primary season. Bowman had attracted negative headlines last year for pulling a fire alarm in the Capitol during a crucial vote, an incident that prompted a misdemeanor charge and a formal House censure. Bowman also had to apologize in January for writing some now deleted blog posts promoting conspiracy theories about the September 11th attacks and Latimer was helped by redistricting, which brought more of the suburban voters inclined to support him to the district. Meanwhile, the Justice Department is investigating Bush's spending on security services after she married her security guard and kept him on the campaign payroll. Groups like UDP and DMFI chose to focus their attention on lawmakers who already had some kind of baggage heading into the primaries. Yeah. Well, yeah. You spend the money where you think it might have an impact, as opposed to, in the Gaza district of Michigan, where the Hamas candidate is guaranteed to win. So that makes sense, but maybe not to the Guardian.
Well, it kind of makes sense. That's how the leftists usually spend their money, to just, they spray around in order to keep their cronies happy and lubricated with some cash. I mean, this obsession with how much money, I mean, this is private money. Yeah? It's not money that has been stolen by the taxpayers like every other kind of expenditure that these very people are arguing for. As I said, the squad is a bunch of socialists who want, standard salaries. They want massive minimum wages. They want salaries for no work, all this kind of socialist crazy stuff, which will come up out of the working people who actually produce and generate the money. But when it comes to private money, they only accept that it's spent in the way that they agree, towards their own cause. And frankly, these guys deserve a medal for unseating Bowman and Bush, because they're clearly not very bright, are they? I mean, the kind of action that they've taken, one is probably a crook, the other one is not very bright. So they've done a favor to the world.
I like the word vulnerable in the title for this one. I love the word vulnerable and how it's used in all sorts of places. These were vulnerable candidates, same as vulnerable people everywhere need to be looked after and sympathized with, even when they lose a legitimate election. And of course, this whole section that we're talking about here is taking the absolute opposite line that the initial article started out with, which is, look how Jewish money can manipulate things. This is the look how the Jews wasted their Jew money on some candidates that were so wobbly they were going to lose anyway, for all the reasons they list. So, and yet they're also shocked that they lost. So they're trying to play it in every direction possible. And yet it all contradicts itself, to be honest. Basically, it boils down to, we don't like the fact that there exists any lobby group that works in favor of something which we are against, namely Israel.
Yeah, and then part 3 is kind of saying the same thing, but with different words, or different, basically, essentially more of the same. Part 3, pro-Israel groups stayed out of races they deemed unwinnable. Many election watchers expected Lee's primary in Pennsylvania to be the first test of the pro-Israel lobby's strength against the squad, but UDP and DMFI chose to stay out of the race. The decision came as somewhat of a surprise, as UDP and DMFI collectively spent nearly $4.4 million against Lee when she first ran for Congress in 2022, but the groups opted out of the race this year after Lee spent her first term in Congress building goodwill with her constituents and delivering more than $1.2 billion in funding for her district. Yeah, we are talking about, internal Democratic Party politics. So the more of other people's money you can get to spend in your constituency, the better you are. Of course, Republicans, I don't think necessarily disagree with that. But yeah, anyway. So it continues. The super PAC, moderate PAC, backed by the Republican mega donor Jeffrey Yass, did get involved in Lee's race, but it was not enough to prevent her victory. Lee ultimately defeated her opponent, local council member Bhavini Patel, by 21 points. A similar pattern played out with Omar. She beat Don Samuels, a former Minneapolis City Council member, by 13 points on Tuesday after pro-Israel groups chose to stay out of the race. Progressive Representative Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American member of the House and one of the most vocal ceasefire supporters, did not even draw a primary challenger. In races where they did not think they could win, pro-Israel groups simply opted out altogether. All right, I think I said what I had to say this by raising my voice when they referred to Rashida Tlaib as a ceasefire supporter. Again, somebody who has been dedicated. When we've done, I don't remember how many episodes we've done that are fully just about Rashida Tlaib, but she again wants a ceasefire when Hamas can't win. She wants fire to continue or resume when Hamas can kill more Jews. So for the Guardian to put it this way, is for the Guardian to tell us what we already know about the Guardian. Marco.
Yeah, it's quite funny how language can actually convey different things, isn't it? Summer Lee spent 1.2 billion of American taxpayers' money in order to, what do you say, to build goodwill with a constituency, i.e., she's been bribing a constituency in order with public money in order to make sure she will get elected again, because 2 years ago she barely scraped through despite everything that happened. So you might say build goodwill with your constituency. If you were on the right, she would have bribed a constituency. So the same action, different words, same result. And this Talib woman, I mean, honestly, what can we say? I mean, shall I just move on? There's no point really.
Okay. Well, again, let's pick on the language here. Look at this mega donor business. I mean, do they describe like Michael Bloomberg as a mega donor when it comes to the Democrats, or is that the kind of snidey phrase you only use when you're talking about the Republicans? There's several things that are relevant here that aren't included in it. For example, Lee is the only one of the squad that has the least safe seat. So you're not going to waste your money trying to get a different Democratic candidate in, are you? You're going to make sure you're trying to fight the case for having her lose that seat, because that's the way you're going to achieve the result that you're after. So you're going to make sure that you can support the Republican candidate in that particular instance, aren't you? But of course, that's anathema to the Guardian that anyone would want to do that in any circumstance. And Rashida Tlaib has no challenger. Well, no one dare challenge her within the Democratic Party, do they? I mean, she's the pin-up Palestinian. So you'd be shooting your own career in the head, wouldn't you, if you stood against her? So of course no one stood against her. But of course we won't refer to that either.
All right, I think there's two more parts. I don't know if we should force ourselves to make it through both. We'll put the link in the description as well. So if people feel like we missed out on part of the article, I want to address a couple of points. One is I can't find this message now, but Susie, I think, said something like, has Candace Owens been reading The Guardian? I think The Guardian has been watching Candace Owens. That's probably more likely. And so have we. That is going to be tomorrow's episode of the Daily Objective, the latest Candace Owens, latest bullshit that came out of her mouth. But also at the end of this article, if you scroll down, as you have with news outlets, there's read more on this topic. And here's some of the read more of our coverage. Some of the stories that are offered here. Pro-Israel money pours in to unseat progressives in congressional races. Pro-Israel U.S. groups plan a $100 million effort to unseat progressives over Gaza. Pro-Israel groups target Republican House candidate they deem anti-Semitic. Pro-Israel groups have set sights on unseating their progressive. There's more like with pro-Israel in it. This is how the Guardian says it. It says pro-Israel, and then it's something to do with money But of course, it's not anti-Semitism. It's just opposition. It's calls for ceasefire is what it is. Thank you, Larasetto, for the super chat. Larasetto says, mega donors, eat your hearts out. Yes. By the way, if we have any Guardian viewers, Guardian contributors who want to move their money to a better place, there is a link to all our membership options in the chat. Okay, let's continue reading. Pro-Israel lobbies messaging didn't focus on the war in Gaza. Although pro-Israel groups targeted pro-ceasefire members, their attack ads generally did not focus on the war in Gaza. That choice was strategic, as polls show that an overwhelming majority of Democrats support calls for a ceasefire. Instead, ads from UDP tried to paint members like Bowman and Bush as uncooperative Democrats, sowing discord within the party and more focused on their national profiles than their district. One UDP attack ad against Bowman specifically called out his votes against bipartisan infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the debt ceiling agreement, mirroring the group's later attacks against Bush. Quote, Jamal Bowman has his own agenda and refuses to compromise even with President Biden, the ad's narrator says. Jamal Bowman has his own agenda and it's hurting New York. That strategy, powered by millions of dollars in ad spending, paid off. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff, for the super chat. Yeah, this is okay, Marco. Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to the ceasefire issue, but there's a bit more in there. Marco.
Yeah, I mean, this article is structured in 5 points they learned from these pro-Israel agencies, how they behave. What the previous point was, stating the obvious. They spend money where it makes sense. So well done, Guardian. You're so clever. And this one is that they've discovered that the pro-Jewish lobby, in order to fight the side that is pro-Hamas, are trying to target the electors, in the free democratic context by telling them about the issue that they care about. They're not banging on about the war in Gaza, a war that most Americans don't give a crap about. But because unlike the Democrats, this particular group of Democrats who are hell-bent into seeing the end of the destruction of Israel, most Americans actually are quite pro-Israel. They quite like to have a civilized democratic state in the middle of the Middle East where everybody else is a dictatorship or some Sharia-driven shithole, really. But by targeting a political argument which is based on what matters to the electorate, again, let's state the obvious, shall we? Just because they're not as obsessed with the agenda that you have, it doesn't mean that it's something even to talk about. But they don't see anything beyond what their target is. And of course, these politicians are just the spear. They're just the barking dog at the end of the leash of the bigger democratic machine, really.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously use the technique that you think is going to make sure your candidate wins by pointing out all of the flaws of that particular candidate when you're spending money to create ads to promote one candidate over another. I mean, that's how it works, isn't it? I mean, what's so outrageous about that? What is outrageous is this framing that goes through the whole article that you kind of referred to earlier, Razi, because this pro-Israel versus pro-ceasefire, you can effectively treat that as a piece of algebra, can't you? You can cross off the two pros as cancelling each other out, and you've got Israel versus ceasefire, which really tells you who in their mind is the good guys fighting peace, aren't they? So they're on the side of peace, even though the side of peace is the paragliders with the little bump on the side, which is the automatic weapon that's going to kill anyone in sight.
I do want to do the last paragraph if you guys are happy to, it means the show will be a bit longer than planned, but there's also a few a few points. Tenebris says, if Jews control the world, why aren't my Jewish lasers working? Well, maybe you should watch tomorrow's TDO. Maybe you're actually one of those Jews who aren't really Jews, but there's something else. Candace explains it beautifully. We're going to talk about it. Susie says Candace is creating a truly strange place for herself in history. Lessons will be taught about how it happened. She got the anti-Semitic fever rather quickly and a bad case of that. I don't think lessons will be taught about Candace Owens. I think it's something that's fascinating for us to talk about now because, you know, she gained prominence by challenging certain things, became quite mainstream, you know, got jobs at somewhat respectable organizations, and then showed who she truly is. But anyway, more on Candace tomorrow. Let's yeah. Oh, the one thing I wanted to address from this point was when they from the previous paragraph is that one of the attack ads says that Bowman voted against the debt ceiling agreement. I mean, I love that. Yeah, you know, why would the Democrats have an issue with that? But apparently, in some cases, they do. Anyway. All right. All right. The last part of this is titled Battle-Tested Progressives Performed Better. Omar knew to expect a significant primary challenge this year because she won her 2022 primary against Samuels by just 2 points. This time around, Omar was prepared. She raised roughly 5 times as much money as Samuels did, and she developed ads early as a sort of rebuttal against potential attacks on her voting record. I just have to say, it's amazing how they describe raising funds in a different way when it's Ilhan Omar for her pro-Hamas stuff and when it's civilized people. Anyway, continues, Lee similarly secured the narrowest possible victory in her 2022 primary, winning by less than 1 point. 2 years later, her margin of victory in the primary had grown by 20 points. Bowman and Bush were less tested, however. In 2022, Bowman won his primary by 29 points, although he tellingly secured only 54% of the total vote. Bush easily won her primary in 2022, beating her opponent by 43 points and securing 70% of the total vote. This year, it seems that progressives who experienced tougher primary fights in 2022 were better equipped to defend themselves when needed. But AIPAC is not only taking aim at Israel's most strident critics. The millions of dollars poured into defeating Bush and Bowman are a warning shot to other members of Congress and contenders that vocal criticism of Israel or support for Palestinians may come at a political price. All right, yeah, I kind of looked at that last sentence, and this is why I wanted to do this paragraph anyway. So, first of all, they're right in the sense that the more ideological people, the people who are seemingly more principled will do better, and it kind of doesn't really matter what their principles are, because you know, in some cases, yeah, people want to vote for those principles. In other cases, it just, you know, it seems like somebody who's maybe a bit different from your run-of-the-mill politician who will do whatever he has to do to get elected and whatever he has to do to keep their seat. So, yeah, on that point, I think the Guardian is right, and unfortunately, we don't have such people in politics who are actually pro-freedom. But yeah, and we see the results of that. So yeah, the last part there, I mean, yeah, the fact that it's a warning shot, again, interesting use of words, may come at a political price if you support the Palestinians. It's interesting that they, again, don't do this the other way. They don't say, look, the fact that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib are in Congress, are elected to Congress, is a warning shot to Jews in America. You think you're safe? You might not be. And the more of us, the Ilhan Omars and Rashida Tlaibs there are, the less safe you are. But of course, they're only pro ceasefire, so that's not going to be included in that article. Marco.
Yeah, what a statement. Omar knew to expect a significant primary challenge. Why does she know that? Because by being openly anti-Semitic and supporting Hamas so incredibly openly and relentlessly, uh, is gonna cause some kind of kickback, isn't it? And she knows that, and nevertheless she carries on. She knows that she could have made her position a bit shaky by pursuing the genocidal agenda of Hamas, but never mind. She knows that people are even stupider than she is, and so they still lend their vote to her. It's sad, sad, absolutely sad. But what's also sad is that in the previous paragraph, Jamal Bowen has his own agenda and refuses to compromise. That's a statement coming from the pro-Israel side advertising. Well, do you really see a refusal to compromise as a bad thing? Perhaps you should reconsider your messaging there, because you're making me sound a bit more acceptable than before by saying that. But it's a screwed up kind of thinking out there. The philosophy is totally rotten. People don't know why they should stand for on the side of Israel. They don't realize that at play it's a matter of morality. What is moral versus what is evil? And if even the pro-Israel side doesn't realize this, it's going to be a very hard fight.
So this last section, there's one more final contortion that this article wants to go through before it's done. And of course, it wants to finish on a high for its side. So it wants to say, look, we are strong. We are strong too. We have lots of millions of dollars too. We can raise it. Even if at the beginning of the article, we're talking about the fact, how can we possibly win in the face of this pro-Israel money that exists? And of course, what are they really talking about when they talk about these candidates and their experience back in 2022? They're talking about complacency as being the problem here, and that's why they lost. But they're not using the word complacency because that's all about effort, isn't it? And lefties don't understand the correlation between effort and reward. So they must be victims of something. They must. So it's pointing that out by inference as well. So yeah, it's how many times has this article contradicted itself? But it's consistently said pro-Israel lobby, pro-Israel money, war language all the way through, and of course, only these group of lefties are on the side of ceasefire.
So Akira says in the chat, in quotation marks, without reason, there's just feelings in the group. I love how we have Raka quoted on in the live chat. Yeah, by the way, I keep mentioning that tomorrow we're going to be talking about Candace Owens. That is on the Daily Objective. We do have the reality show tomorrow as well, and we have we're going to do a recap of Mark Pellegrino's debate with Dave Smith. That recap may or may not feature Mark Pellegrino. I will find that out hopefully soon, and you'll find that out when you tune in tomorrow. Yeah, we have some good stuff coming up this week. We have good stuff every week, but this week we know what it is in advance. We'll be talking about Kamala on Wednesday, and on Thursday we'll be talking about the pro-Palestinian mindset, and we will have a first-time panelist on this show, Lee Pearson, the host of Cutting Edge on it used to be on this channel, is coming back next month on its own channel, produced by ARCUK, but it will have its own channel. The Cutting Edge premieres on I believe it's the 17th of September. Harry Binswanger will be a guest on that first episode. We will have a link for that very soon in the next few days. The channel is already there. Daniel, if you have the link handy, if you can put it there it is. It's in the chat right now. Yeah, so tune in on Thursday. Tune in every day and comment, share, subscribe if you're not subscribed, so that more people see this and The Guardian has some real competition. Thanks, Marco. Thanks, Richard. Actually, I didn't ask you. No, I should ask you where people can find you, because there's an additional answer to that today over most days.
Yeah, I'll start with the additional answer then. My new Substack article is on the ARCUK Substack, all about Gaza, where I get quite a few things off my chest. And I encourage you to read that and to subscribe to all the other great articles that have already started appearing on that. So please do that. And of course, there's always the standard answer, which is our Briefly Objective, the other sister channel to this, where we're using lots of the images of people who are being picked off one by one. So, and we're struggling at the moment because lots of our image bank of rogues is gradually disappearing, with Hanieh gone, Raisi gone, and of course, now we've got two members of the squad gone. So, but there's plenty of material on there, short form material to look, like, follow, subscribe, and put in your social media feeds.
And we're hoping to shed more images for the bank, to be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, that article has been highly praised, rightfully so, by many. So, and it has only been up for what, just over a day and a few hours. So yeah, make sure you read that. It is behind a paywall. Yes, we charge for things in part to fund what we do, in part to piss off the Guardian. Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.